Okay, hello everyone. Today we're going to keep talking about solving rational equations. So kind of just pick up where we left off from last time. So I have the 5 steps to solving rational equations once again. So let's go ahead and quickly go over these. So we want to find the LCD, the least common denominator. Find the restriction, which again, it's any value that will make the denominator equal to 0. So those are the things that those are the numbers that we cannot have because we cannot divide by 0. And then step 3 is multiply everything, both sides, by the LCD. And then step 4 is solving for the variable. And then step 5, which we didn't talk too much of last time, so checking for extraneous solution. We'll talk more about that today once we do the examples. But basically what you want to do is you want to check your answer. So you want to check with your restriction. So if your answer is not in the restriction, then that means your answer is good to go. But if your answer is part of the restriction, then it will be extraneous. So I think everything should be more clear once we do the examples. And again, this is probably one of the harder topics of the semester. So I do want to make sure we kind of, get this down. I'm going to do it kind of nice and slow. And then again, as always, do make sure you let me know if you have any questions. Okay, but as always, make sure you're taking notes as you watch this. And then let's go ahead and get started. So step 1 and 2, find the LCD and the restriction. So LCD, as always, we should always factor whenever we can. So I think this guy over here I can rewrite as x plus 1, x plus 5. And then, so once I factor that, I think I see my LCD. It's going to be x plus 1 times x plus 5. Because again, that's something that all of my denominators can go into. Okay, so that's step 1. And then step 2 says the restriction. So then you want to find the values of x that will make my denominator equal to 0. Well, here it's x plus 1. So what value of x will make that equal to 0? Well, that's going to be negative 1. So here x cannot be negative 1. And then how about over here, x plus 5? What value will make that 0? Well, that will be negative 5. And then lastly, this guy over here, same thing. That's going to be negative 1 and negative 5. But we have those already, so I think we're good to go. Okay, so step 3, let's go back up here. Multiply both sides by the LCD. So let's go ahead and do that. So make sure you're multiplying every single term by my LCD, which is x plus 1 times x plus 5, including this middle one right here, and then this last one right over here. Okay, and then again, this is something we did for the first part of the unit when we're doing multiplying with rational expressions. So first over here, we can cancel these out. Those will divide by x plus 1, and we get just 1 and 1. So then we're left with x plus 5. And then plus, let's go to the middle. This will cancel out with that nicely. And then we have 2 times x plus 1. And then equal to, let's go over here. We can cancel out the x plus 1s and the x plus 5s. So then all we're left with is just x minus 5. Okay, so this is what's nice about multiplying by the LCD is once we do that, right, we started with this whole mess with 3 fractions, but once we multiply by the LCD, we wound up with just this linear equation, which we can all solve pretty easily after a few more steps. So let's go ahead and continue. So that's x plus 5 plus, let's go ahead and distribute that out. 2x plus 2 is equal to x minus 5. Combine like terms, that's 3x plus 7 equals x minus 5. And then let's go ahead and subtract x on both sides, and then subtract 7 on both sides. So I get 2x is equal to negative 12. Divided by 2, I get x equals negative 6. And so that's step 4, is to solve for the variable. And then step 5, you want to check your answer against your restriction. Okay, so once again, our restriction was that x cannot be negative 1 or negative 5. And we got negative 6, which is fine, because that's not negative 1 or negative 5. So then this will be our solution. All right, so that was pretty much what we did last time. Once again, it may look like there's a lot of steps, but I think everything should be, pretty straightforward. It's kind of we're kind of combining, everything that we did over the past couple of weeks, finding the LCD and then multiplying with rational expressions and then solving for the variable. Okay, so let's go ahead and try something that's a bit more complicated, but again, the steps will be the same. So let's go ahead and first do what we know how to do. So LCD and restriction, but before the LCD, let's go ahead and factor. That's going to be x plus 2, x minus 2. So then our LCD will be x minus 2, x plus 2. Okay, and then restriction. So from the first guy, x minus 2, we know that x cannot be 2. And then over here, we know that x cannot be negative 2. And then same thing over here, we have 2 and negative 2. So I think that's going to be our restriction. X cannot be negative 2 or 2. Step 3 is multiply everything by my LCD. So let's go ahead and do that over here, and then in the middle as well. And then in the end. All right, so let's go ahead and simplify a few things. So over here, I can cross off the x minus 2's, and then I'm left with x times x plus 2, plus, in the middle, I can cancel all the x plus 2's. I'm left with 1 times x minus 2. And then at the end, I can cancel these all out because they're the same. I'm just left with 8. All right, so once again, you should end up with something that's no longer any fractions, okay? Which is the point of multiplying by the LCD. And then let's distribute the x. And then here I'm distributing a 1. Okay, so this is really the only difference from last time, okay, is that we see a quadratic, right? This is x squared. But we do know how to solve a quadratic, right? Hopefully, is you want to set one side equal to 0 and then try to factor. So let's go ahead and subtract 8 on both sides. So I'm left with x squared, and then I can combine like terms, plus 3x, that's minus 10 equal to 0. And in fact, once again, factoring, as we mentioned, factoring is probably the most important thing that we do all year. So hopefully we're pretty good with that at this point of the year. I should get x plus 5, x minus 2. And then using the zero product property, I get x equals negative 5 or x equals 2. But that's step 4, right? Step 4 is to solve for x. Again, step 5, let me go back up here. You want to check for extraneous solutions against your restriction. So let's go back. So I got negative 5 and 2. But then my restriction says that x cannot be negative 2 or positive 2. But here I did get positive 2. So that means x equals 2 is actually not a valid solution. In this case, it's going to be extraneous. So do make sure you mark that up. And then x equals negative 5, that one is fine. So we can just say a solution. Okay, so again, that's the point of that's the point of finding the restriction, is so that we watch out for extraneous solutions. Okay, again, if we were to plug in this value right here, if we were to plug in x equals 2 back into our equation, right? If we plug in 2 over here, I will get 2 over 0, right? And we know we can't divide by 0, so that's why 2 will not be a valid solution. Okay, so there's that. And then let's just go ahead and do a few more examples just to kind of get the hang of this. Again, the first steps, or all the steps, will always be the same. Let's go ahead and first factor. That's a times a plus 5 using the greatest common factor. And then I think my LCD is going to be a times a plus 5. So then let's go ahead and do the restriction. So what can a not be? Well, a cannot be 0, because that will make that 0, which will make the whole thing equal to 0. Or negative 5, it looks like. So 0 or negative 5. And then same thing over here, 8 can be negative 5, and here 8 can be 0. So step 3, multiply everything by the LCD. So over here, the a's cancel, the a plus 5 cancel, I'm left with a minus 1. Multiply here by the restriction, or by the LCD, excuse me. A plus 5 cancel, I'm left with a times a minus 7, plus multiply here by the LCD, a's cancel, I'm left with 1 times a plus 5. And again, we should end up with a expression or with an equation with no fractions. So let's go ahead and distribute minus 7a plus a plus 5. And once again, we have a quadratic. So let me go ahead and set one side equal to 0. We have 0 on this side, a squared. And then we have minus 7a plus a minus a. So that I think is minus 7a. And then plus 5 plus 1 is plus 6. Okay, let's go ahead and factor. I think we will get 0 is equal to a minus 6, a minus 1. They add up to negative 7 multiplied by 6. So then what do I get? I get a equals 6 or a equals 1. But again, we still have to do step 5, which is check for extraneous solutions. Well, here is my restriction. 8 can be 0 or negative 5. Well, I don't have either of those. So then 1 and 6 still both be solutions. So 1 and 6, they'll both be solutions. Okay, so in this case, we have no extraneous solutions, and they're both valid. All right, I think I have one more to go just to kind of, get more practice. But if you like, you can actually pause the video right now and give this a try yourself. And then when you're ready, you can come back and then check your answer. Okay, so I'm going to continue. Of course, starting with finding the LCD, but first factoring whatever I can. And minus 5n plus 3 for both of these. So then I think my LCD is n minus 5n plus 3. Which means my restriction is, well, what value will make this equal to 0? It's going to be 5 or negative 3, and 5 or negative 3. So there it is. Actually, in most cases, you can just check your restriction by looking at your LCD. So whatever value that will make your LCD equal to 0, those are your restrictions. But either way is okay. So let's go ahead and do next step, which is multiply by the LCD. And over here, everything will cancel out, top and bottom. I'm just left with 1 minus here n plus 3 and minus 5. n plus 3's cancel, but I'm left with an m times n minus 5 is equal to, and then I think you're going to see what's going to happen here, but let me just write it just to show my work. These will all cancel out, so I'm just left with n minus 4. All right, let's go ahead and distribute. It's minus m squared plus 5m, so be careful of that, equals n minus 4. Okay, once again, we have a quadratic because we have a squared. But what I'm going to do actually is I'm going to move everything to the right-hand side because this right here is a minus m squared. So let me get it on the right-hand side so then I get a positive m squared. So let me kind of draw this out to separate the two sides. And then over here, I should end up with 0. Everything cancels out, and then here I have a positive m squared. So that was the point of doing that, is so that I get a positive m squared, and I have an m minus 5m, that's minus 4m, and then I've got minus 1 minus 4, so that's minus 5. And then let's go and factor. Two numbers that add up to negative 4 times to negative 5. I think it's minus 5 plus 1, which means my m will be 5 or negative 1. All right, and then step 5, check the answers with my restriction. Again, my restriction says that m cannot be 5 or negative 3. But here I did get 5, so then 5 is actually not a solution or not a valid solution, so we call that extraneous. And then m equals negative 1, that one is okay because that's not part of the restriction. And there it is. So let me mark that up. Okay, so that's pretty much it in terms of solving with rational equations. These are probably going to be as hard as we're going to go into. But as always, there are there does look like there are a lot of steps, but it's always the same. LCD, restriction, multiply by the LCD, and solve for your variable, and then check for extraneous values. Okay, so as always, make sure you're taking notes as you watch this, and then please go ahead and try the homework. Many of you have been submitting the assignments and asking me questions, so that's great. Thank you for your hard work. And then, yeah, until next time, have a good one.